Hi everyone, this is Stjepan and welcome to Hanging Pawns. In this video I'm going to go over an exciting English opening game played between Anish Giri and Adhiban Kramnik in the Tata Steel tournament this January. Giri was white and he opened with 1c4, which is not such a common choice for him. He's generally a d4 or an e4 player, but in this tournament, in the Tata Steel of 2018, he played c4 against Adhiban and Mamedyrov as well, so perhaps he started playing it more often. He also won both games, both against Adhiban and Mamedyarov, and they were very instructive, just like this one. I'll leave a link to them in the description below if you'd like to see them. Anyway, after c4, Kramnik replied with the Agincourt defense, e6. We have knight to c3, bishop to b4 by Kramnik. The most common move here was d5 for black, immediately challenging the center. We have queen to b3 by Anish Giri, preparing to recapture with the queen if Kramnik takes on c3. Bishop a5, saving the bishop, knight to f3, c5. A strange move order after c5, and the resulting position that occurred is a weird symmetrical English with black having played d6. We have d4 by Giri, breaking black's blockade, knight f6, giving away the c-pawn temporarily and taking it perhaps wouldn't be the best move, but Giri takes it anyway. We have d takes c5, taking away from the center, and knight to a6 by Kramnik, preparing to regain the pawn and getting a strong knight on c5, at least for the time being, until white can force it out with b4 eventually. Bishop to e3, defending stubbornly, but Kramnik has another attacker he can involve and he plays a great move, knight to e4. Of course, Giri can't take because of the pin on the c3 knight, and the pawn is now falling definitely. There is no more ways to defend it. And the resulting position is a position in which black will have an extra pawn in the center, since Giri captured away from the center with d takes c, so he stands a bit better. We have g3 by Giri and knight a takes c5. Now the position transposed again, and it sort of resembles a good version of a weird Taimanov Sicilian for black, with his queen still being on d8 and not on c7, and white having played g3. But it's definitely slightly better for black, and Kramnik has more than equalized. I mean, he's not that much better, maybe 1/10 of a pawn, but still equalizing at such a high level is an achievement at move 8. We have queen to c2 by Anish Giri, threatening the e4 knight, which is only defended once. And Kramnik responds with bishop takes c3. We have b takes c3, ruining his pawn structure after all, and even though he played queen b3 in the opening to prevent exactly that from happening. The worst consequence of b takes c3 is a strong outpost for the c5 knight, and because he played that, the knight on c5 will either have to be captured by a piece or it will hold its strong outpost forever. We have b6, Kramnik secures the knight even more and prepares to challenge the long diagonal with his bishop, and some normal developing moves, bishop to g2, bishop b7, and both sides castle king side. Here Giri plays rook f to d1, targeting the backward d7 pawn, which is a weakness for Kramnik. We have queen to e7, getting the queen away from the being targeted by the d rook. We have a4. Giri energetically breaks up black's queenside structure and prepares to weaken the c5 outpost. d6 by Kramnik, securing the pawn a bit, a5. And f5. Kramnik goes aggressive on the king side, but it might not have been as smart because he's now weakening his king significantly, and the dark squared bishop has a retreat square in case of f4 anyway. We have a takes b6, a takes b6, and knight to d4, centralizing his knight, preparing to get to the b5 square, knight f6, bishop takes b7, Giri exchanges the bishop, and it's not really clear which side benefits from that trade more, but it has definitely taken a lot of pressure off the position and reduced the possibility of tactics arising. We have knight to b7, knight takes b7, rook takes a8, rook takes a8, and Giri exchanges a pair of rooks and simplifies further. Knight to b5, now he too has a great outpost for his knight and he's threatening the b6 pawn as well. Rook c8 by Kramnik, defending by attacking the c4 pawn, and Giri defends it with queen to a2. We have d5 and bishop g5 by Giri, pinning the knight, and perhaps it was better to just grab the b6 pawn, as this way Kramnik temporarily goes a pawn up after rook takes e4. And we have queen to a8, check, king to f7, of course saving the king, and rook to a1. Giri is playing hyper-aggressive chess in this game, which isn't really what he's known for, and he just goes all in on the attack. We have knight to a5, blocking the connection between the queen and the rook, and Giri just attacks the b-pawn with queen to b8. Rook to c6 defending, and knight to d4, trying to trade the c3 pawn for the b6 pawn, and Kramnik obliges, rook takes c3, queen takes b6, and now knight to c4, threatening the white queen. The queen goes to b8, and here Kramnik should have traded rooks with rook to a3, and if Giri had declined with rook to b1, just hide his king away on g6 and make it a bit safer. Instead, he played a mistake which immediately gives Giri a big advantage. He plays knight to d7, a tactical blunder after which he can resign, definitely, but the variation isn't that obvious. It seems that the queens will get traded and that's it after bishop takes e7, knight takes b8, but after bishop e7, knight takes b8 by Kramnik, Giri has a winning move which Kramnik must have missed, otherwise he wouldn't have gone for this variation. Giri plays bishop to b4, simply trapping Kramnik's rook, which has no available squares to run to. Giri's knight on d4 covers b3 and c2, the rook on a1 covers c1, and the rook is just lost. Kramnik tries the desperate e5, and Giri inserts a Zwischen's rook, which is much better than taking the rook immediately. He plays rook a7 check, getting the king even farther away from the position, king to g8, and now bishop takes c3, e takes d4, and bishop takes d4, and Giri is just an exchange up in this position and completely winning. And what's even worse, the knights are so awfully placed that the d4 bishop can almost control them by itself. The game concluded after a few moves with knight to c6, rook takes g7, king to f8, and saving the bishop with bishop to f6. And here Kramnik gave up, and I mean, it's justified. He's completely lost. There is absolutely nothing he can do to stop the rook and the bishop from grabbing a few more pawns and improving white's position. It was a great instructive game in the English opening that started with the Agincourt defense, turned into a symmetrical English, and then transposed into a weird Sicilian. So those transpositions can be very good to study because you will become more aware of when they occur, and you will know how to exploit them by using the theory of the opening that occurred now, that wasn't played generally in the beginning. And rather than being nervous because what the game first started with now turned into something new, you're familiar with it and you will be able to play better and have a lot more time on the clock. Alright everyone, thanks very much for watching. I hope you got something from this game and got to learn something. Have a nice rest of the day or evening. Bye bye, see you later.